Welcome, Slayer the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Sabbath Sunday. This is where Darin and I get together with you on Sundays to discuss all things Black Sabbath. Darin and I have a Black Sabbath podcast that I will link in the description below. Please check that out. For today's episode, it's maybe a little bit of a rant. We usually don't do Black Sabbath rants. I don't know if we've ever really done a Black Sabbath rant, but this is a little bit of a Black Sabbath rant. We're going to be talking about the business side of Black Sabbath and how that affects the fans, how their business decisions impact the fans. Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. I think we're going to be leaning a little bit more towards some of the business decisions that we necessarily don't care for. But it's something that me and Darin, we often talk about this in our free time. And we thought, you know what, let's make a Sabbath Sunday on this. So here we are. So Darin, the business side of Black Sabbath, how do you think that, that affects the fans, the effect it has on the fans?
Well, there's a lot of ways. And you said that we brought it up in private conversations. We definitely have, but we've also brought it up in almost every podcast because whatever's going on in the historical context of the albums chronologically, there's always something rooted in mismanagement or bad decision making at some level, either in the early stages or in the final stages. And that's a consistent thing. I don't know really what their business practices are. I don't know the ins and outs of what their contracts were. We can only speculate based on the evidence of things that we've seen. I think it's all safe to assume that it appears as though Sharon and Tony own the rights to the name Black Sabbath. So currently, there's some things going on that are blocking certain things from being released, which is unfortunate because now that the band is over, it's a great opportunity to release some things from the vaults. I just saw a bootleg of the Italian trilogy that those three shows from 1973 that they're being bootlegged, and they're being bootlegged like crazy. There's several different versions. This would be an excellent opportunity if there wasn't something prohibiting it because of the Ozzy connection and that versus Tony's ownership portion of it. But I'm speculating that that's one reason, or maybe there just isn't an interest, and that's even more upsetting because why isn't there an interest in putting these things out? So that aside, if it's more of a legal type of thing, it's unfortunate that there was this decision made to have a partnership in this capacity that could be as restrictive as it apparently is. But from my perspective, there's so many things and there's so many bootlegs that come out a lot. And I have several boxes and I've shared some with you of bootlegs that could probably be put out once every 6 months as a series, the Black Sabbath live series. And this Italian trilogy, the good performances, the bootlegs that are floating around, you can hear that there's things that can be improved upon in a studio situation. Some remastering could be done. And it's unfortunate because all we have are these, who knows how many generation recordings that are floating out around, either through the internet or on eBay or some website. But my biggest gripe is that now that the band is not going to be making any new records, now's a great time to continue with the box sets. What's been restricting that? Why did they pick certain ones over others? And what about some of the unreleased recordings, that we know are out there, but still have yet to be released? That's really frustrating as a fan. They have bands like Iron Maiden that, are pretty fan friendly as far as what they're putting out. Mm-hmm. And that's great. And I'm a Maiden fan and I know you are too. So it's cool to get this stuff. But Black Sabbath's my favorite band, and these things, these oddities, these rarities are in really short supply, and I don't know what's restricting that. If it's a business decision, if it's just not really being aware of the value of some of these things to the fans. But it's concerning and it's frustrating. So that's my gripe about it.
Yeah, well, I agree with all that. And you're right. You know, it seems like every time we do a podcast episode, there's some discussion about some bad decision that they made somewhere. And, you know, I should have looked this up before we started, but the Sabbath Sunday that we did on I forget what it was titled, but it was like, what's going on with the box sets? Basically, are we going to get another box set? I think that that's probably going on over a year at that point that we made that video. And that was already months and months removed from the last box set. So we're well over a year since the last box set. Now, my issue with Black Sabbath in the business side of things, and I think a lot of this is because Sabbath is a band rooted in the 60s. That's when they started. Yes, their first album came out in 1970, but they sort of go by this old school 60s model of the way you manage a band, which is basically nobody knows what's going on. It's like Jimi Hendrix, you know, he signed all these contracts. There's albums coming out. Who knows who's, you know, all this legal stuff. And I think with Black Sabbath that they're the same way. And there's sort of this like disconnect between, it just feels like they're not aware. It's sort of shocking that they're not more sort of in touch and in control with what they're doing. It seems like their decisions are made are like not even in the band's hands. It's like lawyers and accountants and all these other people. Whereas you mentioned Iron Maiden, when you picture Iron Maiden, you picture Steve Harris and Rod Smallwood in a room making all the decisions, you know, very hands-on. There's nothing that Black Sabbath, how often has Black Sabbath said, the first album, they didn't know that inverted cross was going to be on the inside. Paranoid, they didn't know it was going to be called Paranoid. They thought it was going to be called War Pigs. Sabotage, they thought that was a trial picture for the cover. It landed up on the cover. Live Evil, nobody knows how the mix got like that. Seven Star, that he thought it was a solo album, but it turned into, I mean, you know, Born Again, nobody knows how the mix got like that. Nobody knows how the cover got like that. I mean, it's just like one thing. Just imagine like Steve Harris saying, I don't know how that cover got on there. You can't imagine that. But Sabbath is sort of from this old school where the band is like Deep Purple's another one where, you know, there's all these managers and legal things and paperwork and getting sued left and right from this person and that person. And so there's this sort of like, they don't quite know exactly what's going on. And to bring it into a modern context, just not that long ago, Tony Iommi, I don't know if it was like a Instagram or Facebook post or an interview, or I think it was in an interview, and he was talking about the Tony Martin years box set. And he said, well, we've released all the Ozzy years box sets. And I thought, no, you haven't.
No,
you haven't. And I bet you he doesn't even realize that they haven't. It wouldn't shock me at all if somebody said, hey, Tony, you know, you only released like 3 or 4 box sets, and you didn't, you know, like, and just not having any sort of clue that this happens. When the Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell deluxe editions came out again, which were the exact same things as what they had put out like 2 years earlier. Iommi was walking around. They were all walking around and posting on their tweeting and stuff. New material never heard before. It's like, no, it isn't. This is the exact same thing that you just put out 2 years ago.
So bizarre. It was so bizarre. I'm like, wait a minute, did I miss something? They just released this. This is like, these 2 albums just came out in exactly this format, not that two formats, CD and vinyl, not that long ago. And everybody's acting, it was almost like the Emperor's New Clothes, like, let's not say anything, you know. But it was so obvious, like, wait a minute, shh, don't say anything. You know, it's so bizarre. But getting back to the Maiden reference, when we did our last video, you and I like continued to talk after we stopped the video, and we did get into a Maiden thing, and you brought up that point, and I said it was a difference in generation. And you're right, when you started out, that Sabbath is from that 60s ish, where all we're going to do is we're going to write the music, we're going to record, somebody else can figure everything else out. Steve Harris, and being part of the new wave of British heavy metal, was the generation after, that came up in the 70s. So they were fans of Maiden and Purple and UFO and Thin Lizzy and what have you. So as fans, they could see that, what was important to have and what type of things the fans really valued having. And so they went about charting their career a little differently. Like Steve Harris would be, like you said, in a room with Rod Smallwood, and they'd be looking at everything from logo placement on the album cover to the artwork to whether or not there's going to be a gatefold, and if so, what's going to be the content, where the lyric, every aspect, tracking sequence, everything. I mean, total artistic control. Sabbath had no artistic control, nor did they even seem to be concerned with it. When you talk about Born Again, the album cover, they were all surprised. Ian Gillan said he threw up when he saw it, which of course he's exaggerating. But the thing is that he didn't see it until after it came out. And why is that? They had no artistic control over the product, which is strange. But maybe that's, and when you're talking about getting involved in the music business in the 60s, you didn't really have a lot to model anything from. The generation before that was the 50s, and there wasn't as much I guess merchandising and things like that as there were from the late 60s or mid 60s going into the 70s. It opened up a whole different dynamic. So there really wasn't anything to compare it to or anything to really build on. So it was kind of a pioneering era of the music business. But when we're talking about Maiden, and then by that time, from the generation that came after, it's like they could see where things needed to be improved upon, and they did that. And the fans benefited because they're fans too, and I think that was the most important thing.
Yeah, and they could certainly, and again, you're right. And hey, this isn't an old story. I mean, it's like practically every band from the 70s can tell you about getting, stories about getting ripped off and managers and stuff. Really, Kiss is maybe a band too that was very in control of what they were doing. They were maybe one of these first bands to really, bill a coin. They got a manager that they stuck with through many years, and they had a real focused plan. And it was Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were really, on top of all aspects of the image of the band, the merchandise, just the whole 360 element to the band. But what's frustrating with Black Sabbath is that there seems to again be sort of this disconnect between them and the fans. And like with this Tony Martin box set, people send me messages. I'm sure the same thing happens to you. And usually my response is that I'll believe it when I see it, because as a Black Sabbath fan, I could totally picture us sitting here next year at this time going, whatever happened to the Tony Martin box set? And just it's sort of vaporizing into the air and nobody ever speaking of it again. You know what I mean? It's like, because that's the way things sort of happen with Black Sabbath. And it's sort of, okay, we're referencing Iron Maiden. I'm sure that like maybe Dave Murray isn't as, in on every little decision the way Steve Harris is or Bruce is, because Steve, it's his band, blah, 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 blah. But it's, like when I remember when 13 came out and reading an interview with Geezer where they asked him about the title of the album. And he was like, I didn't know they were going to call it that. The song Damaged Soul, I didn't know that was going to be on there. We were just jamming in the studio. Rick Rubin must have pieced it together. I never heard it till the record came out. That sound effect of the thunder clap and the bell at the end, I never heard that till the record came out. And it's okay, you might say, all right, well, maybe Iommi's the guy that makes the decisions. But wouldn't you think at some point like Geezer would text Tony like, "Hey, just curious, what's the name of the new album?" Or something like that. And so it's a little like sometimes when you hear them say these things, and it seems like they're so disconnected from what's going on with the music, it's a little disheartening. And it's kind of like, guys, come on, man. Like, there's all these fans out there, and we want these things. And hey, you don't have to give, they're the artists. They can do whatever they want to do. They're not
Sure.
obligated to
Yeah,
open
no.
up their vaults and everything like that. But I think, like you said, at this point in their career, a lot of these bands, a lot of these legacy bands, AC/DC, they put out that, what did they call it? Was it Plug Me In? Or it was like a CD box where they
Oh yeah,
basically
I have
took
that.
every B-side, every
Yep.
Australian version of a song, and they put it all in one place. Here you go, fans. Here's all that. It was shaped like an amplifier. I forget what the name of the thing was.
Yeah, I have it over there. It's kind of behind something, but yeah, I got that. Yeah, that
But
was
it's just an
amazing.
example of like at this point in their career, give, and they were starting to do that. It felt like these box sets were like finally, like the Technical Ecstasy show, live show that was in there. The Sabotage live show was something that had been bootlegged 8 million times, but still, it was an effort. It was an effort to give the fans to give the diehard fans something. And then it feels like it got they teased us and it got pulled away from us.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck with, we're going to get another Paranoid remaster. They're going to give us the mono mix of Paranoid, or, just something completely unexciting that, and
Sure.
it's just
Yeah.
disappointing, because again, as a fan, and this is the problem, you see these other bands doing this, and you see these other bands sort of opening up. Priest was pretty good about that for a little while there. They put out Turbo. It had a live show from that era.
Yeah.
British Steel had a live show. Screaming for Vengeance had a live show. They had, when they did their remasters, they put on B-sides and some unreleased stuff. So they've made some sort of effort in that direction. AC/DC, I just mentioned. Iron Maiden had that Eddie Silver box thing that had all their BBC stuff in it, and all that, they sort of cleaned out their vaults. It had all the B-sides
Yeah.
in it. And you're just sitting here, and we know that there's stuff from the before Black Sabbath, the Earth stuff, and some of the demos that they did back then. We know that these things exist because we've heard snippets of them in unofficial Black Sabbath, those VHS tapes they put out years ago. There was a red one and it was like the
Black and gold.
70s, and yeah. And so we know that this stuff is out there, and it's just like, man, come on, we don't expect you to give us like that Jeff Nichols cassette of them working on Heaven and Hell. I can understand them not wanting that.
At this point, what's the harm in it? I mean, I
Oh,
could
I
see if they
agree.
thought it might tarnish the impression of Heaven and Hell, or some of the music that was coming out in and around that time. But it's been so long after the fact. I mean, we're always going to hold Heaven and Hell in very high regard. So it doesn't matter if we hear like a demo or a rehearsal thing. It's really cool, and but as far as the merchandising goes, to go even a little bit further with that, it's great to have these box sets. They're really cool, but they're really expensive.
Yeah.
We don't need something on such a grand scale. I mean, we've done our videos and we've talked about the box sets, and a lot of people comment that it's just too expensive and they just can't justify purchasing an album they already have, even even though it does contain, some live things and some outtakes and stuff like that. But they really can't bring themselves to spend $100, $200 on an album that they really, a glorified version of an album that they already have. So you don't, as much as I'd like to see Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Master of Reality, in box set format, we don't really have to go to that extent. I mean, just some live recordings, some cool live recordings. Not everybody is, into the underground bootleg network. There's a lot of people that aren't, but there's a lot of people that would really be appreciative of just a single live album from
Mhm.
1971. A lot of great performances, a lot of recordings from 1971. 73, like I said, coming back to this Italian trilogy, even put out like a triple record or a double record set or something.
Yeah.
Something that's not going to be like well over $100. Make something that's a little bit more affordable that the fans can buy and get excited about. We got this record store day thing now, and that's getting
Yeah.
really, really popular. Whether you're for it or against it, it's something that it's there, and it's every year, like 3 or 4 times, I think. Um, Certainly, they could put something out. I mean, I know that there's a couple picture discs, the Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell picture discs that just kind of appeared out of nowhere. I'm not a fan of picture discs, but I bought them anyway. And likewise, Dio, there's a Holy Diver and Last in Line picture discs, but we can get even a little bit more creative than that. We could put out some stuff that not a lot of other bands are doing, calling some their archives for some rare live stuff, and
Mhm.
tweaking it in the studio and throwing some money at it, making a nice package. And I mean, now that the band's like I said, now that the band's not going to be making any new music, it's a great opportunity to keep things for them as well. I mean, you know, if the, there's an interest in buying something, why not sell it? you know,
Yeah.
and no one's forced to buy anything. And people say, "Well, it's a cash grab." Well, maybe it is, but no one's forcing you to buy it. But
Yeah.
I
Look at,
know, there's a lot of people that would like to buy some of these live
yeah.
recordings and things like that.
And look at Jimi Hendrix. It seems like, I mean, he just released another live Jimi Hendrix record. I mean, where do they
Yeah,
find these things? I
and I
keep,
buy them.
yeah,
I
and it's
buy
like
them.
they
I
just
enjoy them.
keep releasing them, and it's like,
Yeah,
hey, that's great because if you're a fan of this stuff, and there's fans out there, and you can put this stuff out, and
yeah,
but again, there seems to be this, I don't know if it's kind of a communication thing. It also seems like like you mentioned at the beginning, we think that it's pretty much Sharon and Tony that have the band name at this point, but who knows? Maybe there's still legal things that Geezer and Bill have to sign off on, things that involve their name, or I don't know, who knows? But again, it's this whole thing. Uh, when you hear them talk, it's like, they can't really even communicate with each other. It's like, it seems like it's such a difficult process just to get anything done, because in the world of Black Sabbath, it's probably the same thing. Yeah, I know it's the same thing with like Deep Purple. I saw Joe Lynn Turner talking about when the Rainbow reunion was happening, and I think it was Eddie Trunk was interviewing. He's like, "Well, when you talk to Richie," and Joe goes, "Oh, whoa, hold on a minute." He goes, "You don't just talk to Richie. You send a message that goes through 20 different hands that eventually gets to Richie, and Richie goes, okay, you can talk to me." And then
right.
in this whole process, he goes, just takes weeks, because you don't talk directly to him. You have to talk to, and I get the same impression with Black Sabbath, that for them to sort of do anything, there's so many lawyers and accountants and managers and astrologists and all these other people that are in there with every decision that they make. And just as a
Yeah,
fan, you're just kind of like, man, I just wish you could, I mean, there's a flip side to that. There's some bands that just put out so much stuff that maybe it sort of takes away from, maybe it oversaturates it and it takes away from it being special. But
but
why not, if you've got things and you've got radio shows and things, like, we don't expect you to put out something that's on a tape recorder in
there's a
somebody's
happy medium.
pocket at a show,
Yeah,
but
I
a
mean,
but a radio show, like you mentioned, Record Store Day. You sent me a message there's a live Dio show. It's a radio show from, I don't know, Holy Diver or Last in Line, and they're putting it out on Record Store Day. Why
why
not
not?
do that?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like there's a happy medium, and I'm not demanding, and I'm not approaching this with any kind of sense of entitlement. If they don't want to, certainly, I mean, that's their prerogative. They certainly don't have to, but it's curious that they are putting certain things out. Then it's a good indication that they're interested in keeping merchandise flowing. I know that I get emails from the Black Sabbath official page, And at least once a month, they'll be celebrating or commemorating a particular album. So they'll put like little shot glasses on their
Okay.
merch page and flasks, and maybe they'll have a couple different shirt designs and things like that. So somebody, maybe not the band, but somebody within the organization is mindful of keeping merchandise flowing and keeping it current. So because they are, let's be more sensible about it and figure it out and think that, okay, so how can we help the fans help us? What can we merchandise? What can we put out there that the fans are going to appreciate, they're going to be happy about, and we're going to make money from? And that's really that's the crux of it all. It's frustrating to see that there's these decisions being made to merchandise certain things that either have already been out or are way too expensive to really, you know, catch on and to have a lot of enthusiasm from the fans. Like in our videos, you know, people were like some people were like, yeah, I'll buy them. I'm looking forward to them. Other people were like, the hell with that. It's too expensive. You know, man, some people were saying, I've been a Black Sabbath fan for 40 years, 45 years. I love Black Sabbath, but I can't afford it. So, I mean, you know, it doesn't have to be like Kiss, or now Ghost is the new Kiss. If you
Yeah.
you know, if you go on social media, there's a, you know, and you like something that even remotely similar to the music of Ghost, you're going to see ads in your feed, and they're always like new t-shirts, and they had like some kind of a box set that was questionable as far as its content, and it wasn't music. There was some risque things in there, and it's like, man, they were really taking the Kiss concept and ran with it. But people are buying it, so why not? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a market out there. There's a consumer base. Why not? And you know what? You always have the option to not buy anything. But if it's there, then maybe, you know, you think, oh, you know what? I've been looking at this in my feed, and that might be something cool to have. It's nice to have it available. And I wish that it wasn't Ghost. I wish it was Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because I'm not interested in buying anything
Yeah.
from Ghost. But
Yeah, I don't need any more shot glasses either. So Black Sabbath, you know,
yeah.
please help us out. So, all right, there you go. A little bit of a rant from me and Darin here. Of course, you know, we love Black Sabbath. I don't think that you know, there's any doubt about that. But this is just, you know, this is just the hardcore fans here, you know, just speaking what's
Letting
on
off
our
some
mind.
steam.
Yeah. So let us know what you guys think. You know, what do you think? Do you wish that Black Sabbath would put out more material, live shows, things like that? Are you fine with things the way they are? Do you find it a little disappointing that Black Sabbath maybe isn't quite on top of their business side, the merchandise side, the way like Kiss or Ghost or Iron Maiden is? Let us know in the comments down below. Let us know what you think of some of our thoughts, and we'll see you at the next Sabbath Sunday.